6 to 8% of the carbon emissions globally come from cement. You can see this as a problem, but if you turn the coin, it can also be a massive opportunity, because obviously if you solve the problem, you have the biggest lever to real change and to real transformation. Because in the end, I think we all want to leave a footprint. We all want to leave something where we can look back and say, hey, this is where we really shaped an important topic. My name is Dominik von Achten, CEO of Heidelberg Materials. I was born in Munich, but then I moved with my family up north to a place called Dortmund. And then about 20 years ago, just about 20 years ago, I moved again down south and joined Heidelberg Materials, and I'm now living in Heidelberg. I'm coming from a family with an entrepreneurial background, so both on my mom's side and my dad's side, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, smaller and mid-sized entrepreneurs, and I think that's something that I got I took away from home in my educational time at home. As an entrepreneur, it's always you're always 24/7 on. I think that's something that I certainly learned at home. It's very similar to my CEO job now. The other point I think that is important, that I actually got to know from my grandfather, who was also an entrepreneur at the time, to be never satisfied with what you have reached the day before. I think that's quite an interesting quote that I still have between my ears. I studied law and economics in Freiburg, which is again down south, about an hour south of Heidelberg. And you can argue why the two of them. Honestly, I thought economics alone, that's more about the practical stuff you can do later on. And then on the legal side, you learn some structured thinking, you learn a little bit focus, and that's why the combination was quite intriguing to me. I'm being honest, to then practice law was not my favorite subject, because I consider this to be content-wise interesting, but from a people interaction side of things, pretty dry. And that's why I basically then turned back into the economy. Studying economics, as I said, I think is something that you may need as a foundation when it comes to the math side of things and maybe the financial accounting side of things. I think there are some good basics that you can carry along, but to a large extent, it's in the end practical stuff that really fills the air there, and that's why I very much enjoyed and mostly remember all the stages or the learning job experiences that I did also during my studies. I think that was probably for me the most shaping moments of my study times. Once I finished my studies, the question was what to do. And I had a couple of ideas, one of which was to become an assistant of one of the board members of the larger company. I think that's something where I did a little bit of an internship already during my studies. That was quite intriguing to me. And then secondly, I thought, as a lawyer, what's the fastest learning curve experience that you can get? And that's how I ended up in consulting. That's how I ended up at BCG. Even within consulting, you have you run different projects, some very short, some very long. And honestly, these very long ones taught me the lesson that at some point you need to be diligent and really get things done. And then there are shorter ones where in a very, very short time frame you have to really be switched on to get to fast results in very, very short time periods. And I think the combination of the two, it was an interesting training ground, if you wish to say so, for a corporate career later on. After quite some time at BCG, obviously you ask yourself the question, do you want to do this for life, or do you want to do another experience and make another experience? And that's where the opportunity of Heidelberg Cement at the time, and now Heidelberg Materials, came along. Already during my BCG times, especially during my time in New York, I did a lot of post-merger integration, so basically the combination of large companies after acquisitions. And here was my client at the time, Heidelberg Materials or Heidelberg Cement, that bought one of the largest construction materials companies in the UK in a public takeover. And it was then a fantastic chance for me to basically transfer my know-how from the BCG times into a corporate career. Because one thing is not so easy, to step out of consulting into a corporate career. There are good examples for that, but there are also examples that culturally that's not always that easy. I already did a couple of construction or construction materials projects during my BCG time. That's how I also, as a young partner, ended up with one of my first clients being Heidelberg Materials. And then when they came along and asked me whether I would like to join their board, I think it was a natural opportunity to jump. It's always a very personal decision then at the time. It's obviously you get some soft knees because leaving a consulting career after 10 years, a successful one, I think it's never easy because you don't exactly know what happens on the other side of things, especially if you go into a large corporate job. But I found it really interesting to just be exposed to something new, and here I went. As a consultant, you ask yourself always, is there something, or are you really burning for giving advice, or are you burning for getting things done? And I don't want to step on the toes of any consultant, but I think in a corporate career, especially in a CEO position, obviously, you also can focus much more on getting things done, driving impact, driving scale. And that's certainly something what I was really, maybe also going back to my entrepreneurial background from home, that really intrigued me. And that's how, Heidelberg came along as one fantastic opportunity. At the time, I'm being honest, outside in, grey powder, dusty, rusty business. You can argue, was that the most sexy part of the corporate world? Maybe not at the time, but it has certainly turned into something super exciting over the years. There are clear differences between consulting and corporate careers. I think there are similarities to some extent. Obviously, it's both, in economic job, if you wish to say so. It's both a very vibrant environment. But on the other hand, personally, I think this P&L responsibility in corporate jobs is something that you don't have necessarily in a consulting job. This question about just giving advice versus really taking action, seeing the implementation, being responsible for the impact. That's certainly a second difference. And the third difference is, yes, consulting companies and BCG specifically are people companies, but in corporate jobs you have a less homogeneous crowd. It's really you're working with people with all different sorts of backgrounds, with all different sorts of nationalities, and you have to get a result done together with them. I think that's certainly something that I love as an exposure to people, but it's something you can probably find in a corporate job better than you can in consulting. It was actually not 2020. Yes, I became CEO in 2020, but in corporate jobs, you typically know it a year in advance. So I knew it about the beginning of 2019. And again, this was not one moment where the light bulb went on and then suddenly this is it. I actually thought it was very, very important for me personally that I had a year run-up before I then formally took over. Because remember, in this case, this was a very special takeover, which I really will probably remember all my life, because 3 years into the job, Corona came. So I took over February 1, 2020. The first, I think, Corona case already happened end of January, and then it really broke out 2-3 weeks down the road in my new job role. That was a fantastic welcome. When I started, we had the one open town hall at the beginning of February, I remember. But when the lockdown came, thankfully, we had introduced Microsoft Teams about a year earlier, and that really enabled all of us to communicate not only internally in the management board, but also globally with our employees. Sometimes you get lucky, but that was damn lucky and damn important to be able to steer the company during those difficult times. During 2020, I remember in the summer we did a very drastic cost reduction program because it wasn't clear what was coming. So 2020 was rough, but already in the second half of 2020, I think things came back a little bit. And I think the most important piece for us as a company, but also for the industry, was the construction sites never closed because it was mostly in open air. So it was not a problem, and the politicians really helped us keeping the construction sites open. That's basically true around the world, which then also kept our business running. And we decided then in the summer of 2021 to announce our strategy that was running until 2025, and that was already setting the foundation for the transformation of Heidelberg Cement to Heidelberg Materials. The change in name was only the outcome of the transformation. The key two drivers were basically decarbonization or sustainability on the one hand and digitalization on the other hand. And those were basically the two legs that the transformation was built on. When I took over my CEO role, everybody said, Dominik, are you really sure you want this job? The citron has been squeezed, efficiency has been done, and here you go. You are a polluting industry. 6 to 8% of the carbon emissions globally come from cement. And people said, hey, especially my former colleagues also from BCG said, you're crazy. The interesting piece here is that you can see this as a problem, but if you turn the coin, it can also be a massive opportunity, because obviously if you solve the problem, you have the biggest lever to real change and to real transformation. And that was really, it's maybe also a little bit my natural tendency or my DNA that I look rather at opportunities and not so much at problems. Yeah, I think the idea around deep decarbonization, that's how we call it here. So to really decarbonize, no offsetting. By the way, that was interesting. From a strategy perspective in 2021, we decided clearly not to allow offsetting. So no certificate buying or anything. It was a dedicated decision to say we want to deeply decarbonize. And then the question was, yes, you can decarbonize the cement or the carbon footprint in concrete by, adding other secondary cementitious materials, by replacing fossil fuels with alternative fuels. That's something you can do, and everybody in industry, more or less, the one faster than the other, does it. For us, and also for me personally, it was really important to put this flag into the 0 point, because that's in the end, once you've done that, it's just a matter of time and resources to solve the problem at very large scale. And that's how Breivik came along. I remember very well that was one of my very first decisions in 2020, because yes, there was all this funding process going along. In fact, the project had already been going on for 16 or 17 years. But it was lingering along a little bit, and then during 2020 we got our arms around it, and by the end of 2020 we took the final investment decision, one of my largest capex decision in the company to that moment, obviously with a significant funding support from the government of Norway, and then the project really was kickstarted at the end of 2020. For me, that was not only an exciting moment, it was, if I talk with the language of my kids, a mega exciting moment. And that obviously is something that will turn the industry into a totally different direction. And Heidelberg Materials being the driving force for that, I think that should give you some happiness. Now it's our idea to basically increase the number of moonshots, so to basically increase the number of carbon capture projects, to bring that at larger scale, the EVO Zero product. And that is my nature again, to try and do things at scale in fast pace. That's where we are. This is the first chemical company, if you wish to say so, the first chemical company within a cement plant. So because carbon capture is a completely different process, has nothing to do with cement production. It has actually already been done in other industries like the chemical industry, like the steel industry, the power producing industry. So in that respect, carbon capture as a process was well known, but never integrated into a cement plant. So the integration between the carbon capture unit and also the 24/7 cement production, that basically was the tricky piece, because we also had to ramp up our traditional cement plant, which is in Breivik more than 100 years old, to be fit for the purpose of a carbon capture plant. The political process was very interesting. I do not remember myself the first meeting because I wasn't even with the company, because the process started 20 years ago. And in the opening ceremony, the energy minister, Terje Aasland of Norway, told me he was already there 20 years ago in a very different role. They basically went through 3 different governments, 2 socialist governments, 1 conservative government during the lifetime of the project. Every government could have killed the project. Every employee within our company could have killed the project, and yet here we are. So it shows you also the diligence and the focus and the ambition you need to have in order to get those projects going. I have a big thank you and a big or a very high opinion of our project team on the ground that has basically gone through that up and down in order to deliver the project in the end. You know, these large projects, they come with a lot of opportunities, but they also come with a lot of risks. So I think, although we had a funding agreement with the Norwegian government, it was clear that we all, as a project partners, had a responsibility to get this project basically in time and basically within budget to the finish line. And that's easier said than done. I can tell you there are a couple of roller coasters as we went along. As always in these projects, there are nasty discussions with project partners, with different employees within the company. But in the end, I think the idea to make this moonshot project happen together, I think that's what glued everybody together and really made it happen. As always in these innovation projects, there are a lot of fans, but there are at least as many skeptics around. Also within in our company, there were people that thought this was a great idea, but I would argue the majority was very skeptical at the beginning. And then in the team, you need to form allies after allies over time. And I very well remember when we integrated the digital twin, basically the training center in Norway. And that's where we then started also to bring in young talent into the project. And they call themselves carbon capture nerds or the CO2 capturers. I think that's a really interesting dynamic that took place, where we then hired the first 30, 40 young talents to really drive the plant to the finish line and to also get it operational. The training center is important because in the end, you know, this is a completely new carbon capture unit, is a completely new integration with the cement plant. And we basically also had to bring in know-how for people that were used to run carbon capture plants, but they couldn't train on anything. So that's where we built the digital twin and basically started almost like a computer game with them to learn the process, to learn the ups and downs of the process, the risky parts of the projects, the opportunities of the project. I think it was a really smart decision of the project team to get that going early on. There is no secret sauce for everything. I think I think in many startups, it's no different in corporates when you do these very innovative projects. You pivot your way a little bit to the end. I think that's clear. But what has helped us and what has helped me personally is to really think the project end to end. Because keep in mind, maybe that's also a little bit special here, but it's a 24/7 material flow, both in terms of cement production, but also in terms of CO2 production. And if you don't get this 24/7 material flow handled, there is no way to roam. So in that respect, we started very early on to really think this project both end to end and at scale. Because again, you know, this is maybe me also a little bit to just prove that something theoretically can technically be done. It doesn't really get me out of my seat. That's the first necessary step, I get it, but that was proven before I even started with Heidelberg Materials. So for us, that was the chance to really say, hey, it technically works. We've got the funding in place, we've got the end-to-end process set up, and now it's about execution and getting the project A, running, and B, producing, and then you know, scaling it up to even additional projects. It's a little bit similar. We all learned during the COVID case. There was an interesting example where a couple of companies had idea how to produce the vaccine, but go back and check who arrived and who did not arrive. And I think, yes, maybe I'm not a doctor and have no medical background, but to the best of my knowledge, it was also very much driven by the question who was able to basically pull off the full supply chain. And that's here very similar for us, because if you capture the CO2, doesn't help you anything because you have to do something with the CO2. In our case, we have to then put it into a pipeline, onto a ship, from the ship into a pipeline to pump it below the sea together with our partners of Northern Lights. If you don't think that end to end, it doesn't. You can spend 300-400 million for the carbon capture unit, but then the CO2 evaporates out into the air. So in the end, you need to think it end to end. And I really learned a lot in terms of focus to get in the end the result produced depends not only on some great technical idea, it really depends on thinking from the original idea all the way to customer delivery, and that ideally in a business case. And that's the other piece I think that the team can be proud of in Heidelberg Materials, that we didn't only think at scale, but we really made sure that this needs to be a viable business case. Because if innovations are not a viable business case from my perspective, then it will be very hard or much slower to scale them. One of the details certainly was the end-to-end piece. I remember very many investors asking me at the very beginning, Dominik, have you put an IP on the carbon capture technology? I said, I don't need and I don't want an IP because I'm pretty sure the industry is so large. The technology of carbon capture will evolve so fast, we basically can't keep up with them. And I don't think it's also we are the right owners for that, because remember, it's in the end a chemical plant. What we did, the second piece, I think, is the commercial side of things. Remember, out of centuries, we came out of a commodity sales force. We were basically just selling a commodity. Or basically, in commodities, you sometimes say you don't sell, you distribute. So now the team really needs to sell. They need to explain the value that we are driving with that product to our customer base, which is a completely different skill set. Needs a lot of own training and also, in some cases, new people added to the team in order to drive the commercialization of this product, because only the technical solution plus the commercialization will in the end make up a solid business case. I'm never happy with the achieved. In the end, it can always be better than yesterday. But in this respect, there were two things that needed to come together. One thing was the technical side of things. So is the project technically working? And then the second piece is it commercially working? And that's where we came up with the idea of EvoBuild, but especially EvoZero as a completely new product. Because traditionally Heidelberg Materials was not great in branding or marketing, but we basically created a completely new product, and that we stamped with the name of EvoZero, and then obviously marketed and sold it to completely a different customer base than we were traditionally used to. So basically, with the commercial side of things, we pivoted to a different customer base, or needed to pivot to a different customer base, because we weren't able or did not want to sell the project to our existing customer base only, but also to open up new customer bases that could be interested in this product, because with this EvoZero, we could drive significant value for them. That gets me really going if people push back on some of the topics. I remember a couple of moments where things got a little bit rough. I think obviously before the first investment decision in end of 2020, there were rough discussions internally within the management board in order to get going. The second one was the question around commercialization, because remember, a commodity sales force comes up with completely different arguments than the arguments I think are necessary in order to value sell the product. And then the third piece is probably once you try to scale the learning from Breivik into other carbon capture projects, you need to fight again end to end for each of the business case one by one. And yes, Breivik is moving in the right direction. Yes, Breivik has proven it can be done at large scale. But every project will again face some challenges within the company, outside of the company, in order to get going. It's clear that for these projects, yes, the technology needs to work, but in the end, technology, I argue always internally, is only maybe 30-40% of the success. In the end, it's the people that make it happen or don't make it happen. So we were very careful indeed with picking the right people internally for this project. We picked a couple of very, very experienced guys internally that had enough experience, but at the same time an open mind to do something new, because you need the combination of the two, and that's not always God-given. And secondly, we obviously brought people in from the outside. I think you also have to, if you try something new, you have to also be open to say, hey, we don't know everything. I think we need external know-how to complement our existing team. And that's where we started hiring quite a few experienced people, project managers from, for example, the oil and gas industry that has already proven that carbon capture can be done at scale. And the combination of the two is then the third element you need to get right to form a team out of those individuals, because an individual can be great, but in a project like this, one individual alone will never do the trick. Whenever you try something new, it always comes with risk, it always comes with uncertainties, and those two things are typically things that human beings don't really like. And I would argue, without any disrespect, engineers don't necessarily like to take risks, nor do they like uncertainty. So I think in that respect, that combination needed to be overcome. And I think, again, with the combination of bringing in people from the outside, but also constantly, giving our colleagues the opportunity to prove themselves that this can be done. I think that certainly, is the ground that needs to be prepared in order to make a project like this a success. I think there have been many moments over the years. But I think, again, it's something that as a leader, you have to ask yourself, how much risk do you want to take? So if you are a very risk-averse leader, it's not a good advice to push people into roles that they don't like. But if you are a somewhat risk-taking individual, I think that's it. Also, again, the two sides of the coin, it gives you massive opportunities, because if you get it right and if you find people that are really burning for the job, but they may not have the experience, I think they go a long way if things go in the right direction. So I have had great experiences with putting very experienced people into the job, but turning them around for the new task. I think that's one piece that's in a corporate job, especially in a corporate environment, very important. And then on the other hand, to bring in very young talents that may not have the experience, but also tickle the experienced ones a little bit at their toes, in order to maybe move in a slightly different direction, maybe move in different speeds, maybe use other processes in order to arrive at the finish line. I think from my perspective, the easiest way to do this is basically to ask questions and not giving answers. As a CEO, it's sometimes you are, or as a leader in general, you sometimes think that you need to give all the answers. I think in the end, if you allow questions, if you ask the right questions, that typically sends the signal to your opposite, well, now I need to get going, now I need to come up with my ideas, I feel empowered to say something. It starts with that little thing. So in the end, for me, the easiest tool is ask questions rather than giving answers. I think there are people and leaders that have a tendency to micromanage, and there are others who don't have that tendency. I'm certainly in the latter, and I think that's an important distinction if you somehow want to make the whole task a success, is you may not need to micromanage, and ideally trust your core team members, but you also have to, for every now and then, check whether they are still on the right track. And if they're not on the right track, you have to help them to get on the right track. And if they don't find their way on the right track, you have to clap on your fingers and say, hey guys, sorry, this doesn't work. Dead end, you have to turn around or even stop something, because otherwise the whole momentum will go into the wrong direction. In the end, for a team to move the mountains, it's all about, from my perspective, energy. If you want people who really get something done, you need to give them the right strategy. On the one hand, that's clear, but then they have to have the energy. And you all know these meetings where you sit, startups is the same thing, I believe. If you sit in a meeting, after half an hour, everybody is starting to play on their computers or start drinking coffee or whatever. The body language tells you there is zero energy in the room. But if everybody after still 45 minutes is still super excited about what's going on, well, that's where energy is created. That's the one important piece. And the second important piece is curiosity. Going back to my very early point, learning is fast learning, but it's learning every day. This includes myself. And if we are both energized and curious to get better every day, that's good enough. I would say my mantra for Heidelberg Materials is this is where we make it happen at scale, or this is what we say in our new strategy, this is where you make the material difference. Because in the end, I think we all want to leave a footprint. We all want to leave something where we can look back and say, hey, this is where we really shaped an important topic. And again, this product that we produce is the second most widely used product after water, and is here to stay. It's fully recyclable, but it has the carbon footprint. And if we can solve that as a team, as the first one globally, certainly that's an exciting story that we can tell and make it happen. Thankfully, and I think I'm really thankful for that, I don't feel any burden of responsibility on my shoulder. I feel the big pleasure of being able to crack that big nut at the helm of Heidelberg Materials and lead a team of 51,000 people around the world. For me, yes, it is a responsibility, but it's a great honor. And going back to energizing, I think it really energizes me more than anything else. What makes me really proud, I think, is to lay the foundations for the generations to come. I have 4 kids. In the end, that's what gets me going. And I think that's why I think these 2 pillars of our strategy, both sustainability, decarbonization, and also digitalization, is something super exciting. We haven't talked much about digitalization, but I can tell you what we have created as a digital platform for the industry together with our partner Commercializing. This is the spot for the generations to come to stand on and drive this industry really forward. If I whisper something into my ear, going back to the start of 2007 or 2007, I would say there is much more opportunity than you think in the end. Very often in a corporate job, you come across the point that you think, this is about it. Everybody's pushing back. This doesn't work anymore. Here's a challenge. Here is something why it couldn't work. I think hindsight, the learning curve, especially through the decarbonization journey and the digitalization journey, is so damn fast, and it's much faster than we would have thought at the very beginning. So that's what I would say to myself. What gets me really going as a leader in the end is cracking the biggest nuts. If you can say that after a longer career, I think that what really gets me out of my bed. This may sound a little bit crazy, but absolutely I would do it again, and I would absolutely would I do it exactly the same way? Probably not. Because again, I've learned so fast during that career journey, but I'm really thankful for being able to get to the position that I was in, and to also have a fantastic team of 51,000 employees around the world that shaped the future together. So I have no regrets whatsoever. It's a lot of joy that I look back to.